Hi! In the previous episode, we started telling you about Soviet porcelain tableware. And if you haven't watched the first part, it's better to start with that. Here's the link. Today, we'll continue and talk about the prices of popular post-war dinnerware sets. What is worth investing in, what is considered rare, how to tell if the price is reasonable, and how prices change over the years. So stay with us, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon. And if you have any suggestions or requests, you can write to me personally. Here's my Instagram. Alright, let's get started. So in the previous episode, we left off in the 1930s of the last century. It was during this period, about a decade after the nationalization of the factories, that large-scale work truly began on developing new forms, themes, and designs. The driving force behind the search for this new style was Pyotr Vasilievich Leonov. He was appointed in 1931 as the chief artist of the Dulevo factory. Interestingly, the young Leonov was just over 20 years old at the time of his appointment, had no connection to porcelain at all. He was an architect. According to rumors, he was helped by Lunakarsky, the People's Commissar of Education. Although Leonov himself, according to the recollections of old Dulevo masters, was a bright, charismatic personality with burning coal-black eyes and boundless energy. Starting in 1932, driven by the idea of creating a new national porcelain and bringing fame to Dulevo, Leonov established a creative art laboratory at the factory. He turned to Russian national traditions, chintz patterns, and the experiments of avant-garde artists such as Varvara Stepanova and Lyubov Popova. They recall the half-forgotten rose pattern Nagashki. More than 120 sketches were created, 80 of which were translated into porcelain. Today, these pieces are extremely rare. For example, on one of the auction sites, Leonov's chintz porcelain from the late 1930s is being sold for 180,000 rubles. In 1934, Leonov designed a set in the Hokloma style for US President Roosevelt. It consisted of several hundred pieces and was shipped overseas in barrels filled with wood shavings. The porcelain set arrived safe and sound. A duplicate of this set can be seen at the museum of the Valekino Dulevo factory. In 1937, one of the most famous Dulevo sets, the Beauty, was created. At the Paris exhibition, the very one, by the way, that went down in history as the great rivalry between the pavilions of Iofan and Spear the Beauty, won the Grand Prix. We found unique footage from that exhibition.
The German pavilion, with a representative of M, Pioni, with a representative of M, Mafiok and Hirschfeld, the commissioner and head of the Soviet Union, with a representative of M, Mark Stormoy, Minister of the Interior, with a representative of Janzai, Minister of National Education, and with a representative of Kami, Choton, Minister of State.
Administration. The service has appeared in films more than once, and the drawing is still relevant today. A porcelain collector without the beautiful Leonov is like a vintage fashion collector without Chanel.
Who even buys this stuff? The simplest answer is everyone. Naturally, there are collectors. And collectors come in all kinds too. There are, in fact, true masters whose collections are so extensive that it's actually a pleasure when such a person finds something from you for their collection, because you know they already have everything. There are also people whose collections are, let's say, for the soul. That is, they don't chase after rare pieces, but collect what they personally like. And then there are people who specifically look for items to use, because they simply like this kind of tableware more. Many even use expressions like, it gives off warmth, or that it has a certain energy to it.
Is it possible to find the owners of vintage items?
If a person has bought this item for themselves, then they are already its owner. If the item somehow ended up on the market, it means someone has let it go. All these horror stories about stolen or looted items. But if we talk about the revolution in the Soviet Union, well, yes, things really did spread out everywhere. But at that point, it was the fault of the people who were directly involved in doing that. And then there are the stories about dumpsters. Now, that's already a utopia, but there was a time when it really was like that, when people were just getting rid of things en masse, and you really could find all sorts of different... Yes, even in the early 2000s, you could still come across things like that.
Write in the comments how you feel about vintage tableware. Do you try to get rid of it? Or is it still used for family gatherings in your household? For example, when you visit your beloved grandmother, does she serve you tea in something like this? Or like this one? Or, if you have a set like this, your very lucky legendary Leonov also had a hand in creating them. To this day, these are some of the most expensive Dulevo series. By the way, the introduction of bright selenium, that orange color like on the golden deer, is also Leonov's achievement. Before that, it was hardly used because of its flashy tone. In fact, this brightness was appreciated at the World Expo in Brussels in '58. Leonov once again received the Grand Gold Medal, this time for the golden deer. And along with him, Dulevo porcelain artist Alexei Sotnikov was awarded the Grand Prix for his sculptures Falcon and Hen. This forever established the factory's logo since 1962, the proud falcon's outline. If the falcon is red, it's first grade. If blue, it's second. If green, it's third grade. At the end of the 1950s, one of Dulevo's most recognizable series was born, Lilac. Let us know in the comments if you had it. Prices for lilac on the vintage market today are quite low. A tea set starts at 500 rubles. More exclusive and artist-designed series are valued much higher.
There were mass-produced ones. They stamped them out, like the girl in the green dress, and they made 100,000 of those girls. Before they made her in a green dress, an artist came and made her in a yellow dress. 3 pieces. The same girl, exactly the same, but the dress color is different. That's it, because there are 3 of these and hundreds of those. And here, well, the accessibility of the internet sometimes plays a different role because people can get the wrong impression. We just had, well, not a conflict, but a disagreement with some customers. We got one set that it shows up quite often. Well, it's that Dulevo polka dot set for 3 people. But the orange one is common. The red one is a bit less common. But this time it was a dark green one, and there aren't any, not a single one, anywhere. The customer's question was, why did you price it so high? Look, they're going for 1,500 on Avito. Sorry, but those are the orange ones.
This is the girl with the sad eyes, Anna Yatsevich, the creator of the signature LFZ pattern and one of the symbols of Russian porcelain as a whole. The cobalt net, an image of searchlights breaking through the windows of besieged Leningrad, crisscrossed with tape. This austere cold painting style appeared in 1944. A native of Leningrad, she refused evacuation and continued working at the factory throughout the siege. She worked on camouflaging ships, using ordinary porcelain paints that the factory still had in reserve. Success came to the artist 6 years after her death. At the same 1958 exhibition in Brussels, where the Golden Deer of Dulevo was recognized, the LFZ Cobalt Net quite unexpectedly received the gold medal. It was unexpected because no one was betting on this series. It was included simply to round out the assortment. Yatsevich has another design that is perhaps just as famous. It's the very logo of the LFZ factory. Today, you can easily find LFZ tea sets and individual teacups and saucers on the vintage market. The cost starts from several hundred rubles. Besides the cobalt mesh, the most popular series are Winter Evening, Golden or Golden Autumn. Oh, those are the options. You definitely have them. Well, or your grandmother, mother, sister, someone definitely has it. So what else? There was Coral. Look how beautiful it is. Very thin. A gorgeous tea set. Cobalt. Here are some variations on the cobalt theme. Drawings by Chikonin student Alexei Vorobyovsky are highly valued. For example, like these. Or like these. If you don't know who Chikonin is, there's a link in the description. You can watch the first part of the episode. The factory still continues to produce porcelain based on Vorobyovsky's sketches even today. But the works of Alexei Viktorovich himself are of museum and collector's value. Friends, for now let me show you a basin with fish. The much talked about part
Is almost gone. There used to be a bigger pile here.
What a catch! And Tass says, Nastya told me too. From the 1920s, a real rarity,
From before the war,
to the pond, how much are the fish selling for?
100 rubles each.
So if anyone needs them for their collection, if any broke, there were 6 here, I think, yes. and the carafe.
These white ones are the best, as I see it, even the quality is different. If you look, one is simpler, the other is more refined, and they come from different factories. The thin ones are also quite common. These gold ones are rarer. The coolest ones were the green ones.
If you find the green one, buy it.
And yes.
So what's the most valuable thing here right now, say, on this shelf?
If we take this shelf, then this set right here is absolutely stunning. This is our sand-colored one, Pervomaisky Porcelain Factory. I'll take it out now, probably, and show you like this. In the back there are teapots, a large bowl, and 6 small ones. So it's an oriental theme, 57 sand-colored with a good mark. And the quality is absolutely amazing. It's hand-painted, detailed with gold, and it's a real rarity in the complete set that we have. It's 44,000 for a part, and that's not even the limit, actually. I saw once, for example, a single teapot in this color scheme being sold for 17,000, and there are sets ours has 50 pieces. Mostly, these are from Soviet years, Georgian, field flowers, Baronia. There are different names, but most often people know it as Baronia. And just 3 years ago, we sold not a complete set, but a pretty decent configuration for 20,000 rubles. Now, a single creamer costs 12. Here's an example of rather rare and expensive Verbylki Lunotsvet. I really like it. It's a beautiful color. It has a very beautiful color, and it's detailed with gold. And it's amazingly huge, almost for 12 people.
How much does it cost?
This whole set is 47,000.
At Verbylki, also known as the Dimitrov factory, also known as Garner, the third major porcelain manufacturer in Russia, alongside LFZ and Dulevo, you can recognize vintage tableware from this giant by the image of a moose if the porcelain was made after 1965. And if LFZ, during the Soviet period, it still preserved its own aesthetic and peasant motifs, using them very sparingly, for example, like Vorubyovsky, whereas Verbylki and Dulevo in their series went all out. Bright Pastora.
Here are some simple Verbylki pieces from the 1980s, like these.
What do simple Verbylki pieces look like? These little roses? Well, it's pretty primitive.
The decal is already quite simple. First of all, yes, it's a decal, not hand painting. Simple shapes, and it's heavier now, even by weight. These Brubari from Verbylki, they're different. There are various kinds too. They come in a whole bunch of colors. And here you already see a gradation. First of all, the number of surviving items, the quality of the surviving items, and the color. Again, the question of color. There are green, yellow, raspberry, and red ones. They're quite common. But there's also blue. But those are very rare. And so, again, we'll see a sharp price disparity. Once again, we'll see this kind of sharp price imbalance.
The most popular Soviet series from Verbylki is Barbary. I'll show it to you know where it is, the beautiful Barbary. Pieces with the DFZ logo, of course, are valued higher than those with the moose. And especially if they're red, that means they're of the highest grade and earlier, making them more expensive. Vintage as an idea for preserving capital is interesting.
It's 50-50. So here, you really need to understand certain things. If we're investing in the 19th century, for example, if we come across imperial porcelain, those items naturally appreciate in value. Their status increases. The more it's over 100 years old. But now, well, actually, quite a while ago, the law was changed here. The law on antiques. Now, antiques here are considered 50 plus years old. But according to, let's say, the classic understanding, antiques have always been considered 100 plus years old. The very earliest Soviet items, and of course, everything pre-revolutionary. We're looking ahead. All these leading factories, yes, pre-war pieces, and the rare FZ that pops up, because it's still the most in demand, the most trendy. GDR pieces are more often, mostly figurines, I'd say. And also, well, from the leading factories like Meissen, for example, those are investments. France, Limoges. It was completely unexpected for us when the total lockdown was announced and everything was shut down. We were in absolute shock because we thought, that's it, now we'll be chewing grass here and have no idea what to do. But quite unexpectedly, demand increased significantly. So there were two factors at play here. Of course, first of all, people were stuck at home and bored. Perhaps it really was one of those moments when people started trying to invest, since things were being sold. Well, not just about porcelain, but really antiques and furniture were being snapped up too. Now is the perfect time. It's the perfect time to revive the tradition of big, beautiful table settings and gatherings with fine dinnerware. Take your favorite cup out of the cupboard and have some coffee. By the way, many people tell me that drinking coffee from an antique cup is nothing like drinking it from an ordinary mug. I have my favorite story that I always tell everyone. From when I first started working here, porcelain was never really my main specialty. I'm basically an art historian. So I go to visit my grandfather and I see a tea set displayed in the cabinet. My eyes nearly popped out of my head because it was from the 1950s. Verbilki, and not just from the 50s, but specifically from 1950 and 1951, because the mark on it was only used for a very limited time. And it's a large set for 12 people. It's also rare. I think it's called aquamarine. For us, it's just an everyday thing. We've been drinking tea from it our whole lives. You don't even think about it. I don't get anything out of it. I just never really paid attention to porcelain. It's just porcelain. If you don't know, but the price tag on it is around, well, he has it listed at about 50,000 rubles for the set, just off the top of my head. Maybe it's even more now. And this one here is from the GDR. By the way, let me try to hand it to you. Hold the teapot in your hands.
Guys, it's weightless. The history of Soviet porcelain wouldn't be complete without mentioning the products from the countries of the Eastern Bloc. The GDR, Czechoslovakia, and Poland. Right now, write in the comments if you had this truly legendary mother of pearl tea set. And if there was such a service, then by Soviet standards, your family could be called prosperous, because the name of this porcelain measure of success is almost canonical. Madonna. There were queues for it, and the Soviet contingent who served in the countries of the socialist camp considered it their duty to bring the set for themselves and their families. The Baroque style painting and gilding in the decor made the dishes refined and luxurious. Interestingly, in the Soviet Union, both the set and the pattern were called Madonna. In Germany itself, it was called something else Maria.
We are now focusing on Ulrika, a person whose financial situation is currently being discussed. Specifically, the amount associated with Ulrika is 38,000 rubles. This figure represents a significant sum that has been allocated or is relevant to Ulrika in some capacity, and it is important to note the exact numerical value of 38,000 rubles in this context. For 12 people.
Actually, if you think about it, that's not expensive.
Let's count the number of items. It seems there are over 50 of them.
That's a lot.
So if we simply divide the price by the number of items, it really isn't expensive. Especially considering that this is at least from the 1970s, so the set is 50 years old, and it has been preserved in such perfect condition.
Now, this price is comparable to what it was sold for 50 years ago.
Yes. Actually, it's a bit of a strange point, but what was expensive back then remains expensive now. Low production runs in the 1950s give us only a few individual items. Today, high production runs in the 1980s. Almost every other household had, those infamous fish-shaped decanters with a bunch of little fish. Nowadays, they're not expensive since they weren't all that interesting to begin with. But, for example, 1 ruble and 45 kopecks. Yes.
For a single cup.
A tea set. Sometimes the entire set might even cost. We have the whole set 1,400.
Well, look, if you just add a couple of zeros here, it would be...
It's about the same with Taurus. Everyone is different, as always, and I never want to offend anyone. It really does lead to some curious situations. Sometimes we've had people come in who insisted that we should recalculate everything strictly by the calculator, converting the Soviet-era price exactly to today's value and selling it for the same amount.
How interesting.
Yes, well, sometimes, as I said, it does match up.
But how do you evaluate the journey of this cup? Through time and space?
It's roughly a philosophical question. It's the same situation as when people want to sell silverware by weight.
There's no need to be afraid of fakes.
In general, when it comes to Soviet porcelain, for this segment, honestly, in my experience, I've never come across any... If you're delving into the 18th or 19th century, then you need to be careful, because there are all sorts of crafty people, the money involved is different, and in that case, fakes actually make sense. Figurines, yes, sometimes they do get faked, but from what I've seen, let's say, on the internet, where people share their experiences. These are very low quality fakes, and it's obvious at first glance that they're not authentic, because that subtlety of the artist's hand painting, it's absolutely impossible to fake.
What should you be wary of when buying vintage
Pieces? Yes, the issue of restoration. There are a few points to consider here, so to speak. The first point, there are people who, in principle, do not accept restored porcelain. That is, again, we're mostly talking about serious collections where restoration really does sharply lower the value. In those cases, of course, restoration is out of the question. And then there's commercial restoration. That's when, for example, you take a cup. Let's say we have a cup, a gardener cup, an exquisite, incredibly thin little cup, and it even has that design that shows through in the light lithophane, just amazing. But here, we clearly have a noticeable crack and a significant chip. You can easily see it, and it certainly doesn't look very nice at all. So the restorer calmly fills in the cracks, fixes the chip, and covers everything with varnish. For example, I have a saucer with a defect like this. It sells for 3,000 rubles, while a perfect one goes for around 12 to 15,000. With restoration, plus the cost of the restoration itself, it comes out to about, it will cost around 7,000. That's for one that's intact. So that's half the price of an undamaged. You won't be able to tell the difference. What's the difficulty with restoring dishware? You can't use it for its intended purpose. Restoration materials are quite toxic. And it's absolutely not recommended to drink from such dishes. Lids, for example, are fine, handles too. While they don't come into food, doesn't come into contact with them, the danger here is that unfortunately there are unscrupulous sellers, there always are, who restore them, who restore and then pass them off as original. They sell them for under 10,000. They present the item as new without admitting that it has been restored. For a figurine, restoration is quite a significant factor. If we're talking about collectible items, then of course an item that is completely intact and has survived in its original condition is valued much higher than one that has undergone restoration.
Of course, the factories mentioned are far from being all the porcelain manufacturers in the Union. Each hallmark has its own story. Hundreds of collections, sketches, and respected names of artists, sculptors, and ceramists. Baranovka, Kajta, Kuzjajevo, Konakovo, Korosten, Bogdanović, Proletari, Riga, Sumi, Dovbiš, and others. The history of each factory is worthy of its own story. Soviet Union porcelain is a rich subject. For research there is a wealth of information, and you can continue exploring this topic on your own. Thank you to all the channel sponsors for your support. Follow us on Yandex, Dzen, and Instagram. If you enjoyed this episode, share it on social media. See you next time.